so pleased to be here is because, just like every one of you in the room, I too am a knowledge animator. Somebody who brings knowledge and reading and learning alive in people's lives. And that's exactly the new definition of librarian. Today and tomorrow, you as librarians will have a very interesting job, because the root of the word librarian comes from liber. And liber in Latin means two things. What's one of them that it means? Does anyone know? Can you guess? Librarian, what does it mean? Well, one of them is book. So liber is a book. But there's another meaning too. Liber means freedom. And we deal in the freedom of people. The freedom to read because you want to. The freedom to learn because you're curious about something. The freedom to think about something that you've never thought about before. And that is our business. That is the world that we're shaping, where people have those freedoms to make choices. Okay, so now I'll begin more formally with the script of what you have in front of you. I want to offer each of you warmest congratulations on being here, on achieving this stage of the Living Library Award. And I wish you well for the competition ahead and for this wonderful journey you're on. Last night, we heard about the criteria for the award. And the last thing that was said was that the criteria is about happiness, about enjoying the journey. And whether you win or whether you come close to winning this wonderful award, you will have journeyed through your Living Library plan. And somehow, for many of you, that plan will become real through sponsors, through determination, and through the support of your communities and the people who say of your library, it's my library too. So I wish you well on that journey. So, what goes into a Living Library strategy? What I want to share with you is the journey to transform libraries, which is also going on today in the UK. I want to offer some common experiences and some resonances with your own situation. And I'd like to speak about the developments in the UK public libraries, and then to touch on wider issues like trends in reading. What are young people doing? Are they reading, or are they using computers? Or are they doing both? What will reading be like in 5 years or 10 years' time? Will people still be reading? I would tell you definitely yes, but perhaps in different ways to the ways we see today. And then I want to have some very practical, easy and creative ideas that will help you and go into your plan. Does that sound all right? Does that sound okay? This is going to be interactive, so I'm going to be asking you questions as we go along to keep you involved. So, for the past 8 years, we've been running an award in the UK called the Libraries Change Lives Award. And the award has been developed by our professional association, the Chartered Institute of Library and Information Professionals. And it's been very interesting to see how this award has affected not only the winners of the award, but also the people who have submitted their library, and how much publicity it's given to the impact of libraries. The award is worth just £5,000, and 2 runners-up receive £2,000 each. This is one of the runners-up from this year's competition, Books on the Edge. Books on the Edge is a way in which teenagers who say they don't read and they don't like reading have got involved in the library in Blackburn and Darwin. This award is for multicultural development in Lincolnshire, where a library service decided that just because there weren't many people who were different in Lincolnshire, it was important to celebrate different lives and different communities. And this is the one I want to say a little bit about, Sighthill Library, which has won the Libraries Change Lives Award. Now, for many of you, you're probably the only person who's the librarian in your library. Who amongst here is the only person in their library? Just you and the staff. Are you the only librarian? And how many of you have too much money to spend in your library? No one? We all need money, and we all need the ability to do what we want. But I'm talking about a library that actually had no money but a lot of ambition. Let me tell you the story of Sighthill Library. Only just now has it closed for a long overdue refurbishment. It's quite a shabby library. There aren't any special features. There aren't any lovely furniture in it. Because the changes started with people, and they started in 2003. The library was plagued by gangs of youths, 20 or 30 at a time, frightening and intimidating other users. Unemployment in the Sighthill area is 18% of people have no jobs, and 25% of households have very low money coming in. The area's got its share of problems. It has vandalism, graffiti, underage drinking and drug problems. There were threatening behaviour and all very serious for the library. Library use was very low. People were afraid to come to the library and to bring their children. The changes began when the librarian decided not to replace the person at the door who was the attendant, but instead to start talking to the young people with herself and her staff. She worked closely with the local community, with the police, with youth workers, and with other agencies. And they decided to make the library much more relevant to the local community, especially young people and their parents and carers. And new staff were taken on with just one question at the interview. Only one. And that was, what would you do if you had to organise an activity for young people in the library? So she started with no money, but a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of creative ideas. And every one of you here has that same enthusiasm and that same rich resource of creative ideas. So right now, there's a Computer Crazies Club where the children design their own websites. There's Reading the Game, all about football. There's a youth books group where young people review books and CDs and films and websites for the library. There are dance, drama and arts workshops. There are IT sessions. There are game sessions. There are creative writing workshops. And a hugely successful video diary project where a group of young people went around the Sighthill area and videoed life today in their part of Edinburgh. As a result of that, they won sponsorship, and this same group of local youngsters went on a fact-finding trip to New York. Now, by changing the small things, by deciding to talk to rather than throw out these young people who were causing difficulties, that's what made the difference. Antisocial behaviour in the library has all but disappeared, and a big fall of 75% in complaints by other users. In other words, they've made the library a living library for young people, but at the same time, they have not taken it away from being the library that belongs to everybody in the community of all ages. So when you plan your living library, you don't have to decide between whether you have a library for young people or a library for older people. You really can design a library and a space that meets the needs of everybody, whatever their age and whoever they are. So overall usage is up, and still more positively, the libraries become the focus for activities that improve the literacy chance of young people, and they can really spread their wings. Julie Riddle is 16 years old. She's been coming to the library since she was a child, and she feels things have really changed. She says this: "The staff are great. You can talk to them just like friends. They've really helped me a lot." Now she's involved in all sorts of projects, and she's set on a career in drama. The library really has changed her life. Jane Milne, who's the library manager there, says this: "It's brilliantly fulfilling. I've always wanted to work in a library like this. We're not keeping our heads down and doing our own thing. We're spreading the word." And that's what you're doing as you make your living library plan. You're planning to spread the word, and you're creating a library that you've always wanted to work in. It's very interesting that the staff in Sighthill Library, it's been voted the best place to work in Edinburgh, and it's a library. Isn't that wonderful? We've got another campaign which is running right now, so I can't tell you the results of it, but it's called the Love Libraries campaign. And it's just started in March, and the idea is to explore a new vision for a 21st century reading service. It kicked off with the dramatic transformation of 3 libraries in just 12 weeks. Now, they're still being transformed, so I can't give you any more. Love Libraries campaign has been making over, we call it a makeover, 3 libraries in just 12 weeks. This is one of them. This is Richmond Library, and I used to work in this library, and it's a very old building, and that's what it looked like. Those are the newspapers. That's what it used to look like. And it's being made over and will be launched on the 3rd of July. And on the website, Love Libraries, you can actually watch the library being transformed. What it aims to do, just as the TKP has aimed to do, is to be a showcase and a model for how libraries might be. And it provides a really exciting template for other libraries by combining existing best practice and new ideas for an inspiring new vision of a reader-centred library service. Now, the project involves the physical makeover of the buildings, and it uses experience from retailers, designers, space planners to remodel the interiors. But it also looks at library opening hours and book stock, and looking at the range and whether there are the newest best-selling titles available. And also there are publishing marketing people involved as well. So it's very much about libraries working with the people who are also in publishing as well. It also uses technology, and it makes the borrowing experience more personal and convenient. Just as here in the library you have the self-issue checkouts, it will have self-issue there. And there's lots of imagination going into the high-profile events. On the 3rd of July, the results will be brilliant, inspiring community venues for consumers to visit online and offline, and attractive to all ages and social groups. So if you want to follow their progress, please do track them on www.lovelibraries.co.uk, and it's in your paper. And to quote the director of the reading agency, Miranda McKierney, who put this together, she says, Love Libraries will enable us to showcase the best of current practice while exploring ideas for 21st century reading service that meet the needs of a contemporary audience. The transformations will take just 12 weeks and will harness the combined skills and energy of the local authority, library peers, the book trade, celebrities and the local community. What's important is that at the end of it, there'll be an online toolkit for consumers to show what they can expect from a good library. When you feel alone when you're doing your living library plan and you think that maybe you don't have enough staff, then the people to look to are the people who use your library, because they too are on your side. And there are many ways that we're finding in the UK where people who use our libraries can be champions and advocates for the service, helping us in lots of different ways. The other outcome of this 12-week experiment will be a toolkit for librarians across the country to use on how they too can transform their library. For example, it will include having a guide, a checklist on how to run focus groups with the users and the non-users of your library. It will also include a checklist for a good survey and how to survey the activities that you're doing. Lots of things that you need to find out, thinking of the terms of this award, to find out whether you are really meeting the needs of the people whom you hope to serve. It's also got people from all walks of life who are acting as library champions. Does anybody recognise this person? Her name is Jacqueline Wilson, and she's the writer of lots of books for teenagers, and many of the children in her books are children who are orphaned or who are fostered. And she began with a very good novel called The Story of Tracy Beaker. And there's something interesting about Jacqueline. Every time she writes a book and it's published, she buys herself a silver bangle. As you can see, she's a very successful writer. She's just one of the great champions for Love Libraries. The other is J.K. Rowling of the Harry Potter books fame, and also Salman Rushdie and other writers who are offering their support and offering to make personal appearances to say why they love libraries. So I think what we've learned so far is that we're not alone. That when we're trying to raise the profile of libraries, when we're trying to get people to use libraries more, or people who don't use libraries to use them for the first time, it's not just our efforts, but the efforts of other people, of footballers, of other people who can say, I use my library, why don't you? Or who can say, I used to use libraries, but I didn't know what they were like today. You have to go and see what they're like right now. They're very different from how they used to be. Even when we do make changes in our libraries, we are not good in the UK at letting people know. Public perception is out of step with the major changes, and we're in danger of losing our mainstream audience. Let me give you some research. 42% of adults have not visited their local library in the last 2 years. And 50% did not know it was possible to order and reserve books in advance over the internet. So we're not very good at telling people what we're all about. What we have come up with, though, is this, which is the Little Book of Public Libraries. And it's absolutely free, and we hand it out to people who want to be library champions. And I've got a few copies with me, but not many. I couldn't carry so many. But all it does is it gives facts and figures to anybody who wants to say how much they like their libraries. That's fine, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Siricorn. So what it does is it just gives people an opportunity for them to tell everybody else why they think your library is excellent. I've got a few copies. I hope please take them later, but just a couple to show you. So thank you. What that means then is that we've got the techniques and we use everybody to help us sell our libraries. Now we know as well that after the Love Libraries campaign, we're actually going to work nationally to raise the profile of libraries, featuring at least 2 media campaigns each year targeting key audiences. Because here's the bad news. We've just about to launch a survey of what do people think of libraries. It's due for launching on the 19th of June. And this report promises to be quite challenging for us, and you may find the same results when you do your work for your living library plan. What we found is that for non-users, for people who don't use libraries, they have very negative and fairly deeply entrenched perceptions. They actually say, the library, it's not for me. Even though the libraries may be modern, even though they're very attractive, we cannot take for granted that just because a new living library is there, that it will be noticed or that it will overcome existing negative perceptions. These are all people aged between 14 and 35. The second point is it's clear that different groups consider themselves as distinctive with distinct and discrete needs. And therefore, it's got to be a shift from one size fits all to more of a menu of choices and options. And I think this is very important because what we found is that when we make an offer to young people, for example, not all young people are the same. Teenagers, some are interested in music, but some are interested in other things. Teenagers are just people like you and I who haven't lived as long as we have. Though many of you are very young, I am very old, so therefore I've got more years to find that out. But basically, people like to choose. They don't like to have just one offer. And that's difficult for us, because that could be more expensive. The final thing it says is attract me. Tell me why I should come to your library rather than go to the theatre or go to a museum or to go out and enjoy myself with my friends. Why should I use you? And what we have to do is to capitalise on the library as being a treat or an indulgence, a place you really want to hang out. And it will call for us adding other activities, having partners who may have their services within the library. But of course, we can't be complacent, can we? All of this is true, but we're trying to change things by Bookstart, which has just been refreshed. It's the most wonderful programme which gives every child that is born in the UK a book and a pack, a Bookstart bag, at the ages of 8 months and 2 years and 3 years. At 3 years, they get a treasure chest of books. And we think that this will make a very, very big difference in the lives of the next generation of children to simply enjoy books and reading. Our Minister of Culture, David Lammy, says this: Bookstart is a simply beautiful idea. Giving books to small children helps them develop confidence and gives them curiosity about life and the eagerness to learn. I am so pleased that public libraries play such a pivotal role to support the delivery and enhance the experience for families. So you can see that we are trying to change the future, but we have quite a way to go, because our biggest challenge at the moment is the fact that many boys are not reading. They're not reading, first of all, because they don't see their fathers read. A recent survey found that 25% of children had never seen their dads reading. They're not reading because they don't think it's cool. They think that reading is for people who are academic. It's not for life, or it's only for study. It's not for enjoyment. So we have to change that. And at the moment, we're working to make 2008 the National Year of Fathers Reading, because it's not right that many boys are underachieving in their learning, and all of it stems from a love of the pleasure of reading. Okay, here's just a few words that were gathered about how libraries can mean different things to different people. And as you're preparing your living library plan, a very useful thing to do is to say to people who use your library, if you summed up what the library means to you, what would you say? And then you gather all of these phrases of what people have said the library means to them, and you put them up on a wall or a window in your library, because that tells you about the different, strong and varied and diverse place that is that word library. The meanings they hold in people's lives are very wide. We're not so different in the UK in our libraries than the libraries here in Thailand. We have a common purpose with you and a shared mission, and that is to breathe new life into our libraries for a new generation and a new era. Yes, it's about our libraries looking different. We want them to look modern and attractive and inviting. We want them to compete with the shopping malls and the other leisure facilities that young people will enjoy. But to me, it's about the heart of the library too. It's about you and your staff and how you welcome people, not just to use the library, but to be part of its planning and part of its shaping. The physical changes can be made without large sums of money. Annisland Library took a lot of phrases like this, they put it up on acetate, and they placed it in the window of their library. At Sight Hill Library, they got the young people to design the guiding for the music, so they used graffiti-style lettering and designed the signage for their library. Also, in other libraries, they have developed groups of friends, and these groups act as income generators and fundraisers for the library, and they form a federation under something called the Library Campaign. And towards the end of the year, the Library Campaign is going to publish a handbook for groups of friends. Can I ask, does any libraries here have a group of friends, a group of people who will fundraise for you or help you? No? Yeah, some you do. That's very useful, isn't it? It really helps to get other people helping your library. Another thing I've seen people do is to sponsor rooms or parts of the library. So, for example, if you have a local business that is next door to your library, then you can invite to name a room or an IT facility after that company. So they act as sponsors for your library. And certainly I can think of at least 3 libraries that have used local businesses to fund some of their library services. The other thing that libraries are doing is they're working very smartly to actually share their developments. This is a concept called quick reads. This concept, quick reads, is all about having books that are very short and very compelling for both adults and teenagers who simply don't like reading or aren't very practiced at their reading. And what Essex Libraries did was came up with guiding and signage called Quick Reads. And they share the design of that, and it's free for any other library to use. So libraries are helping themselves to share ideas, to share expertise, so that one person designs it and everyone can use it. That's a very powerful and cost-effective way of working. Okay, now you can also come together particularly effectively to share reading choices. Let me give you an example of teenage reading choices. At the moment, each year, Tower Hamlets libraries produce an annual teenage book list with 40 novels called Essentials, the Best Reads. The novels are picked and tried and tested by young people, and then it's made free of charge to every other library. So that means that they too can use this reading list, and only one person has developed it. A publisher called A&C Black have just produced the ultimate teen book guide. And for the very young, the National Talk to Your Baby project, run by the National Literacy Trust, has produced a pack called Share Books and Talk Together, with photocopyable leaflets for parents. Issues is another great publication that I just want to show you. I'm very welcome to pass it round. It's available on the net as well, and there's a website for you. What they do is they take topics of interest to young people. It includes things like drug abuse, the waste problem, poverty, animal rights, our internet society, the globalisation issue, you okay? Terrorism, disability issues, mental well-being, alternative therapies. Those are just a few of over 60 lists. And they produce a contemporary guide to that piece of information. And that's really useful because it means that for young people, they can have a bite size of information to enable them to think about the things they want to talk about. They want to discuss about the state of our world. They want to know more about climate change. And often they also have to write essays and projects at school. So this has a double use in helping us to be more informed, but also helping our studies as well. So, create once, use many times is something we're trying and getting better at learning as a lesson for being efficient as well as effective. Community involvement, I guess you've guessed by now, is very important to me. Not just listening to people, but working alongside them. And what I find so marvellous about TKP is the way in which it's embraced that at the centre of the developments here. So whilst we're sitting in a place that is 4 times as big as the previous Tyne Knowledge Park, what we have is the same ethos of being centred around the people that use it, their views, their experiences. And I salute you, Dr. Sericorn, and your team for being so living about the concept of the living library, because with people at the heart, it will never no longer be a living library, always will live forever. So, marketing, this is what Sarah Watson says. Marketing, we're going to speak a bit more about after the break, but I wanted to just say that it really is very straightforward. Most of it is common sense, and it's about simply new approaches to engage with people from a very practical base. Can I offer you just 10 things to consider when you're marketing? Some of these you're probably doing already as you make your living library plan. but others might be useful to you, and they're these. First of all, agree your key objectives. What are you going to do, and who is it going to be for? Secondly, just write down all the services you offer. This is something that a lot of libraries never do. They don't write down everything. They assume that people will know. Well, by writing it all down, it makes you walk in the shoes of your customers and see the service from their point of view. Thirdly, talk to 10 customers about how they rate your services. From 10 to being excellent, to 5, it's good, but could be better. Do you want me to come that side? Is that better? No? Okay. Next, ask 10 different customers about how much they know about the range of services on offer. So you can use your list to say, did you know that we offer a service where you can ask us anything and we will find the answer for you? Many people don't know that about their library. And then talk to 10 non-customers about why they don't use you. Later on, we've got a handout to look at the reasons why people don't use libraries and how we can work on those. Then write down 3 benefits of your service, which you can back up with evidence. 3 good things you do to change lives. Get these 3 mentioned in everything you do and all your communications. So focus on the message of 3 things that you're good at. It could be you enable people to enjoy reading. It could be that you enable people to make informed choices. And it could be that you're simply a fun and enjoyable place to be. Then list how and where in the last year you've communicated with your customers. Have you used the media? Have you used other people? Have you advertised? How have you communicated with your customers? And list how and where in the last year that you've communicated with your non-customers. How have you actually advertised the service? And whenever you write something about the service, whether it's a press release, to promote it, ask, so what? Will somebody be interested in what I have to say? So with that basis, you've got a very clear idea on how you can move forward to get people either more involved or to work on the areas of improvement that every library has. You've got this shining example of attracting and having activities to draw in readers. But do be aware that one of the challenges for all of us is how you keep going. It's really good to have a month of activity, but it's really hard to have a second and a third and a fourth month of activity and to keep the momentum going for what you do. So the clever way to manage that, which we found in Essex, was to enable people to do it themselves. Let me tell you about our reading groups. We have 70 libraries in Essex, and we aim to have just one reading group in every library. But the way we set it up was for the reading groups to run themselves, with a minimum amount of input from the library staff. We provide the venue, we provide the books, the reading groups run themselves. Today, there are over 300 reading groups in those libraries, and they're growing and growing and growing, and there's no problem with them continuing to grow because they're self-sustaining and self-sufficient. Many libraries in the UK also see themselves as places that can be used by other organisations. Sighthill is a good example of this, where they say, come and run your event in our library. Come and have your consultation. Come and give advice to people. Come and join us in the centre of our community. Fundraising and the role of friends groups has already been mentioned, and this is certainly an area where I say the UK is doing well but could do a lot better, like our friends and colleagues in the United States, where they do this brilliantly. However, we see a growing need for libraries to diversify their income, and certainly we're getting very good at writing bids and proposals for funding, That's an expertise that we've all developed. Good library indicators. I just want to say a bit about what we do now. The word is impact. So when you write your library plan, one of the things you can consider doing is to write it backwards. Now, what do I mean by this? What I mean is sit down with a blank piece of paper and imagine what it would feel and look and be like to have a day in the life of your living library. What will it be like at 8 o'clock in the morning for you and your staff and your customers? How will it feel during the day? Will it be busy all the time or busy just in particular times? Will you have a sense of visitors, people coming into the library because they want to be there? What will it be like for people who don't visit the library? So what you can do is actually plan from the impact backwards. Public libraries in the UK have a set of standards, 10 standards that they must meet, and a set of impact measures, and they're just being revised just now. However, they're not always very clear to the customers of what they should expect from their local library, hence the toolkit that will come out in July, so that they can measure up their local services. The 10 standards include targets for friendly opening hours, being open when people are not at work and not at school. They include access to the internet and the numbers of new books bought each year. From 2007, the impact measures will include things like 19% of homebound people having a library service to their home, 94% of book start packs being delivered to 9-month-old children, 10% of the child population joining the Summer Reading Challenge, and a particular target is for 9% of boys to join that challenge, and 50% of children finishing the Summer Reading Challenge. And how about this? 90% of children satisfied with the services they get. So we have to be really nice to children and really appreciative of what they want from their library. Other developments are going to include value for money and efficiency, virtual visits, and looking at how effective and satisfied our customers are who log on to our library service, and participation. Just now in the UK we have a tranche of services that are national. One of them is about Inquire, and it's a new service where you can have a live link to your librarian over the internet. During the daytime, the questions are answered by one of the many authorities around the country. During the night, it's answered by our colleagues in the US. So it's a 24/7 inquiry service available to everyone in the UK. There will be other measures as well, but the excellent impact of the reading mission, this is this year's Summer Reading Challenge. And last year, 600,000 children took part in it. As you can see, this year's theme is all about spies. And they have a secret agent's attaché case. And the theme is all about the current passion by children for spy stories. Now in its 8th year, the research is absolutely wonderful. It says this: 66% of children now read more books as a direct result of the reading challenge. 455 read a book they would not normally have picked up, and 785 in the sample said they were better readers. And this year there's going to be a new leaflet for parents on ways to help their child compete in the Summer Reading Challenge. So what we found with Book Start and with the reading mission is that the more research you can do, the more evaluation and measurement you can do over time, frankly, the more money we get for keeping these programs going, because the evidence becomes the reason to carry it on. The proper use of IT is your final area of challenge as you write your living library plan. And there's a rich seam of tried and tested websites in the UK to animate reading. This is one from the US called Meet the Author. And I'm sorry I couldn't get the image onto my PowerPoint. But what it does is it has hundreds of authors talking about their books. And it includes J.K. Rowling, Jacqueline Wilson, and many others. ForYouReaders.net is a wonderful site that's run by libraries, and it's got some super zones in it as well. Just show you a few of them. It's got The Lads, Book Brother, Girls with Attitude, and Claire. This is the site page for The Lads. They like it a lot. This is Claire with Book of the Month and other choices that people make. I like Girls with Attitude. We're very much focusing on the interest of girls in health and beauty. And so a lot of the books are tied into lifestyle and to health and beauty because that's what they're interested in. And then, of course, we link in with music. So you can see here some of the music tie-ins and the famous Robbie Williams over on the left there. And Book Brother is a live webcam, and it's a way in which people vote each week to throw out a book from the book room. So, for instance, this person is writing about a book that they really love and asking for it not to be thrown out of the book room. And it's called Book Brother because there's a famous television programme where people are thrown out of a house over several weeks. This site is called Give Me a Break, and that's because for many of us, we read because it gives us pleasure, but also because it helps us in our busy lives as a stress buster. I'm not sure how that translates into Thai. But the idea is to get away from it all, and to relax and have real pleasure from your reading choices. And a new site from Scotland called ScottishReaders.net is really fun because it takes reading and eating, two things that you can both love, and it has a dish of the day. So you can do this in your library. You can have a board and you can have the chef's choice of the reading. You can have a dish of the day special, and maybe you can have a wonderful sweet read as a dessert. So a very easy idea and something that can be done both online and offline. Okay, I think I've spoken for long enough. I want to open up for questions in a moment. But if I can just offer you a few other easy and creative ideas that I've seen work, maybe that will just be useful to you, or things you're already thinking about, it may help. One of the things we're doing with the BBC is we're putting listening posts into 30 of our libraries so that people can listen to the radio, and it's got interviews with authors to listen to. If it's successful, it will be rolled out nationally next year. The idea that when you ring up the library, and sometimes you'll put on hold, and we have usually music that you listen to. Do you have this here in Thailand? Yeah? Where you have music that you listen to. Well, libraries have decided to record stories instead of the music. So as you listen, you'll hear a piece of a book or a piece of a story, and you'll always want to find out what happened next. They make the recordings of books, and this is especially relevant for people who are blind or partially sighted, by getting volunteers to record stories that can then be loaned to people who are blind or partially sighted. So think about that. You can have a book swap section, because people not only want to borrow books from the library, but they also want to get good ideas of what they could read next. And if you have a book swap section where people bring one and take one, then that works really well, especially for comics and for magazines. All the good ones go, unfortunately, but it's a great idea for people exchanging good reads. You can ask all the business in your locality if they would like to name a shelf in your library, so you can put their name in your library. You can have a reading wall where book reviews are posted up by lots of people who read, and it can be written there for all to see and enjoy. And you can have book reviews in the front of your library book chains, so that somebody who's read a book writes what they think on a special label in the front of the book, and then someone else borrowing it can either add to that or say something completely different, that they didn't enjoy it or did enjoy it very much. You can have seeing the words, asking local artists to draw something inspired by a book or a story that meant a lot to them, so that you can literally make the pictures, in the text into pictures, and make the words living words and visual words. You can keep a display of a book at the counter, a book of the day, something that one of you or one of your staff would recommend as a good read for other people. You can have quotes, the quotes that I mentioned that you've asked of your customers. You can have them on bookmarks and on bags. You can webcam your library so that virtual tours and visits can be made. And there are some wonderful images of TKP on the web, and that's a great model to see. And most of all, you can actually have smart use of the net with cool guides to the best web resources. So those are a few practical ideas from our experience with the People's Network, and also our experience of trying to make our libraries living libraries. No doubt you'll think of other things, and no doubt I want to hope that we can be partners as we develop our shared approach to living libraries. There's no doubt that this is the time for libraries to come into a new golden age as powerhouses of knowledge and compelling services for the customers today and tomorrow. I am certain that you will rise to the challenge with creativity, determination, and most of all, as was said last night, a great deal of enjoyment. Well, that's enough for me for now. I thought we'd open it up for some questions now and things that you'd like to ask while you're having your coffee. So thank you very much. Okay, hello everyone. Have you had a good break? Are you feeling a little cooler? I'll be happy to answer any questions, so it's over to you to ask anything. Here we go.
อยากจะถามว่าวัฒนธรรมการอ่านของคนอังกฤษเป็นอย่างไรบ้างแล้วก็ในเรื่องของวัฒนธรรมการอ่านนี่จะเป็นปัญหาอุปสรรคหรือว่าทำให้เราทำงานสะดวกขึ้นไหม
That's a very big question that I'll probably answer in the next piece of my presentation, which talks about the reading culture. But in a short answer to that, I'd say it's very mixed. There are some people who read a lot, and we see a lot of people on trains who are travelling to work, reading newspapers and magazines and books. And I'd definitely say there's a trend towards more reading of what I call magazines, newspapers, reading the internet. Converse to that, there's still a lot of new excitement about reading for children, because there's such a lot of good children's writing from babies to teenagers going on. So the reading culture, though, is not one thing but many things. And still for many teenagers, they read secretly because they perhaps don't think it's cool to read. So they'll pretend that they're not reading, but they actually are reading a lot, and they're reading many different things. So they're reading the internet, they're reading magazines, they're reading comics and they're reading books as well. So they're growing and diversifying. But I'll say a little more next, if I may, in answer to that. Thank you.
ในห้องสมุดของเทศบาลนครอุดรธานีมีผู้สูงอายุมาใช้บริการเป็นจำนวนมากนะคะเป็นทั้งผู้เกษียณอายุอะไรอย่างนี้ถ้ามีแนวทางในการส่งเสริมกิจกรรมสำหรับผู้สูงอายุจะดีมากเลยค่ะ
Oh, thank you. Yes, there's a lot going on for older people in the UK. As you'll see from my slides when I show you, we have an ageing population in the UK. So what we have are activities that are intergenerational. So for example, we have sessions in the library where young people will show older people how to use the internet, and they will help them. And what is so nice is there is a respect between the older person and the younger person, and it is very nice that the younger person is teaching the older person something. So we encourage young people to have free sessions on the internet, and in exchange we ask them to come and help older people to use the internet. One of the things we find with our older people, our older citizens, is they often feel left behind. They feel as if young people are getting involved in something that they don't understand. So, for example, older people can do research on the internet for people that they want to find out or get in touch with. The second big use of the internet by people, older people, is with email, so that many older people may have children or grandchildren who are living in another country, and by learning how to use the email in the library, they are able to keep in touch in a cheap way, a cost-effective way, because it's less expensive than telephoning. The other activities for older people, of course, is them sharing their stories. And we have a lot of projects where groups of young people, I have one example in my own organisation, where we got young people to interview farmers in a rural area of Derbyshire. And we asked them, what was life like living in a rural place and being a young person? Did you have fun? Did you have parties? Where did you go? Did you have dances? What did you do when you were young? And the young people have recorded all of these memories onto videos and onto a CD. And those memories are now being used. They're called living memories. And they're being used for school projects, but they're also being used to be a very treasured resource for what life used to be like. And two things happen from that. The young people suddenly realised that older people were young once as well. And the second thing that happens is older people feel valued, that for the first time their experience has been recorded and has been valued. One reference to give you in the UK is the Centre for Intergenerational Research, and it's an international centre run by the Beth Johnson Foundation, and they gather good examples of intergenerational practice. A final thing to say, in the UK we're very worried about the way in which some young people do not respect older people, and we're also worried about some older people who do not respect young people. So we're trying very hard to enable younger people and older people to understand each other a little more. So the final idea I would offer you is something I've done, which is where you get a grandmother and a grandchild to recommend a book to each other. So, For the grandmother, they might recommend a book that they enjoyed as a child that they think their grandchild might like. For the grandchild, she might want to enable her grandmother to be a bit more modern, and she might recommend a teenage novel for her grandmother to read. So you can have what we call book buddies, where people will recommend reading to each other. So all of these things enable us to have our libraries as being for everyone, not just the young and not just the old. Does that help you? And a few ideas to think about.
อยากทราบว่ามีกิจกรรมที่เกี่ยวกับส่งเสริมอาชีพทักษะของคนพิการนะคะเพราะว่าที่อำเภอระโนดมีชมรมคนพิการนะคะอยากทราบว่าเขามีกิจกรรมเสริมทักษะอะไรบ้างให้กับคนพิการในห้องสมุดนะคะ
We have a lot of policies about equal access for people with disabilities. So, for example, many of the reading groups will have people who are wheelchair users, or people who are blind or partially sighted, or people who are deaf who are members. So many of the books that are used in the reading groups are available in Braille or in large print or on tape so that everyone can share the material. Our major book prizes, like the Booker Prize, has all of the Booker Prize winners and shortlists translated into Braille and into large print. So that makes the stock very accessible. In terms of activities, what happens is we often have local libraries will have a consultation group. So for example, when they're designing a new library or making a living library plan, you will have a group of users who have sight impairment or who are deaf or who use a wheelchair. And you will ask them, what do they want to see in the library? I can give you one example from my own experience. When I was designing Croydon Library, we used a local consultation group so that when we were making the library, we asked the person to look at the plans and tell us which bits of the library were hardest to use, which bits were easiest, so that in the design we could change these things. Every public library in the UK, by law, must have access for people who are using wheelchairs. Now, what happens is that means it's actually easier for everybody. Because if you have a pushchair with children in, or if you are elderly and you use a walking frame, that means that the library is easier for you as well to use. So we have legislation that helps us. Also, if you have any publications, like the Little Book of Libraries, like this, it's not only available like this, but it's also, everything is available in large print or Braille. So you can get this in different formats. So all our publicity is available in different formats for people who have sight impairment. The third thing to mention is the online access. And there's a site called the National Library for the Blind, which runs an excellent website for teenagers with sight impairment. And they run a fiction cafe on it. So the young people who have sight impairment will recommend good reading to other young people who have sighting impairment. And the thing that the National Library for the Blind do, which is very important, is each year they have an Access Award for all public institutions, but particularly libraries. And they have an award for the most accessible websites. So is it easy to read? Can you just have the text on the website? How easy is it to navigate or to have, if you have speech software, which many people do, as they use the internet, does that work for you? So they have awards for those libraries.
Would you change because
Is it not working?
Is this louder?
Is that better? Yes, that's a bit better, isn't it? So there are many ways in which you can work with people. I suppose what we've learned in the UK is to ask people. Because what we found is that one group of people with disabilities may need one thing, and another group may need another thing. And those things that they need will change over time. So it's important to keep on talking with people with disabilities. So we offer integrated services, but also special services. And we try to make sure that everything we do is advertised so that everyone can take part and enjoy. So, for example, if I was speaking in a public library in the UK and one of you happened to have a hearing impairment, we may have an induction loop in the room that would enable you to pick it up with your hearing aid, or we may have somebody here who could do sign language, who could actually say what I'm saying in sign language. Those are the kinds of things. Does that help you a little? Okay. All right, I think we'll talk a bit about the reading culture. This is quite a quick one, so it'll only take about 10 minutes, but it'll give you some facts and figures. And what I want you to do is to think about whether you know this for Thailand, and I'll be wondering whether you found these things out. Okay, I mentioned that we're getting older. We actually know that soon the people who are of pensionable age by 2007 will actually outnumber the number of people who are children in the UK. We also know that we have more and more people from other countries who come to live in the UK, and more people from other cultures. And we're very pleased about this, but it does mean that there's more diversification. We know, and this must be the same here as well, that people are getting busier and busier in their working lives. And that means that we're not just competing for money, we're competing for people's time. We have in the UK the longest working week in Europe, so we work very hard, as people in Thailand do. So we have a lot of people doing a lot of work. And we know that on average, a person in the UK will have 76 hours a week of media time. So that's television, the internet, newspapers, 76 hours. We've got a lot of young people who own their own computers. That's the blue line. But also a lot of people who, because of public libraries, have access to computers at school, at home, or in their local library. What we're finding, let's look at some trends in reading and learning to answer your question about the reading culture, is that this is an interesting one about the hours spent reading, and I just want to show you one thing. Children begin to read more and more and more, and then they level off and read a lot from 17 to 24, and then look what happens. What do you think happens at that point in many people's lives when they get to 24 or so? Well, many of them have children, they have families, and they become very, very busy, and so their time to read falls right down. And then perhaps when they get older, when they've maybe left work at 55 to 64, then they have more time to read. I wonder what this would look like in Thailand if you were to draw a graph of people reading over ages. Then we looked at reasons why. Why do people use libraries or borrow books more? Well, they're saying that if they want to borrow more, it's because they've got more time, or it's because they can't afford to buy books, or it's because it's more convenient. Maybe the library has started opening longer hours. But then there's the reasons for borrowing less books. And that's because there's not enough good books, is what a lot of people say. They also say it's less convenient. Maybe the library is closed at the weekend when they actually want to use it. Maybe they buy their own books, they buy more books. Or maybe they have simply less time. The biggest reason people borrow less is because they have less time. So what we're saying is that reading and your age is closely linked. You will read more when you're younger, and you will read more when you're older. We're saying that the availability of time and the busyness of people's lives is a key factor in their reading choices. And we're saying that, frankly, reading is competing with a lot of the leisure activities we have and a share in our day. Well, we know that 58% of the UK population belong to a library. Now, that's over 27 million people. That's a lot of people. But the worrying figure for us is that the people that use the library once a fortnight or more could be as low as only 20%. So in other words, a lot of people are members of libraries, but they're not using them on a regular basis. This shows you a bit more what that last slide did. Lots of people not visiting libraries and not many visiting regularly. If we look at whether more men or more women use libraries, it's very clear that mostly women use libraries. 59% of women use libraries. So again, lots of activity to try and attract men to use libraries because of their role as fathers and their role models as readers. So the challenge is for us to tell a new story to a new audience, to reflect the lives that people live and the priorities they have. We start with them, not with the library as it is today. We then looked at time of day. This might be interesting for you to do for your research. And we said, okay, when's the busiest times? And as you can see, over 70% of people visit the library between 8 and 3 p.m. Not many in the evenings. I wonder what it would be here. I'm sorry about this. What do they do when they get there? Well, a lot of people borrow books or browse around. That's no different to here. But what we find is that whilst older people focus on books and newspapers and magazines, younger people, this is obvious, will focus on CDs, on videos, and they'll be seeking information and looking for study facilities, simply a quiet place to work. So we ask people, why don't you go to the library? What puts you off? A lot of people say, I've no reason to go. Why do I need to go to the library? They don't know what the library has to offer. Many people are too busy, and many buy their own books. Those are the key top 3 reasons. And some people are simply say, I'm not interested in books. So we asked people then to rate what they liked about their library. What was the reasons that they carried on using it? And this is the good news for us, that number 1 was the helpfulness of the staff. And that's you. And that means that people really like the way in which they're treated with respect. People listen to what they want, and they do everything they can to help them. So the heart of any good library is its staff, as you well know. They then looked at access, as you can see, and therefore that's very high on our agenda, to try and make the library accessible to everybody. And that means opening hours as well as physical access. Can I get to it when I want it, where I want it? You've got this in your handout, so we'll talk about this a bit later, but it's suggested, we asked people to suggest an improvement to the library. And if we turn to young people briefly and libraries, this is a very key slide for me because it shows how things are changing for young people. What we're seeing in that 4-year period is that young people aged between 7 and 14 are doing less physical activity. They're doing less sport. They're playing less with their friends. They're playing less with their toys and their games. But guess what they're doing more of? Using their computers. 13% rise in their time. People are smiling and nodding. That must be true here also. Books is about the same. So in other words, books are not the enemy of computers. What they are is complementing computers. And what's being lost is the physical activity of young people. And at the moment in the UK, we're very concerned about young people leading sedentary lives. We're concerned about diet and healthy foods. And we're concerned about the number of young people who are getting obese and overweight. And there are health risks for them later in life. And they're shopping less, which can't be true, can it? We shouldn't be shopping less, we should be shopping more, but they are. So, this is young people's access to the internet by age, and as you can see, because of internet availability everywhere in schools and in libraries, it means all teenagers have regular and good access to the internet. And this is where it seems to change. We found that when youngsters are aged 5 to 8 years old, then for them the computer is less important than print. But then when we looked over time to see what would happen, we then found it was reversed. So what we've concluded, and this is for boys and for girls, it's the opposite. So boys are keener on computers and girls are keener on reading, basically. Then we looked at where libraries were in a range of choices. So in other words, eating, going out with your friends to the cinema or to parties, and eating at a restaurant. After all of that, the library came next. It was more important than sport, more important than taking breaks, and more important than other cultural activities. So we were pleased about that. And young people do the same things as other people in the library. They borrow books and they browse around. But we think that because 40% look around, they may not always find what they're looking for. And we need to know more about whether they do find what they're looking for. We'll talk about this in a minute when we do a brief exercise. But we also asked young people what their vision of an ideal library would be. And it includes a good cafe. It includes everything that is here in TKP. It includes being local and convenient within walking distance. It also includes reading. They want relevant reading materials. They want to read things that interest them. They also want quiet spaces. And many of our libraries today are zoning themselves into quiet and noisy spaces. And they're zoning through time in the day. So they know at certain times of the day they'll have far more families and children. At other times of the day, it will be much more quiet in the library. So we're trying to respond to all that. But most of all, they want to be involved in their library. Okay, I'll skip over this. So we decided in the UK that what we needed to do was to focus on young people aged between 16 and 25 and young families. And if we focus on them primarily, then we will begin to attract the 16 to 25-year-olds when they grow up, because they'll continue to use the service. And we also felt it was important to ensure that everybody culturally was included, so an emphasis on ethnic minorities, and still keeping our core users who are aged over 55. So if you look at those two primary ones, young people and young families, what are the things that matter to them that they're not getting? And they said it's time. We just don't have the time to come and use the library. So what we've done is we've responded with quick reads. Many libraries will give a quick choice when you walk in. We know people are on their lunch break, they're in a hurry, they're very busy. So we try to have quick visits and respond to that. They also say, well, I don't have to come to the library. I can go somewhere else for learning. I can go somewhere else to get internet access. And they say, it's just not for me. I'm not interested in books. So we try to make the libraries a place where you're interested in knowledge, you're interested in learning, you're interested in having fun, places that are simply enjoyable to be and spend time in. We try to address those negative images. So in summary, what people are saying to us is, give me a reason to go beyond books. That's what they want from our modern public libraries. Are you planning to do research to find out what your users think as part of your living plan? Yeah? Well, I just want to say that it's really easy to do research. You just have to ask people what they think in focus groups or in questionnaires. And in the UK, we've developed something called the Longitude Toolkit, which is an online resource that librarians use all the time. And what that does is it gives them ways in which they can run effective focus groups, ask questionnaires, and you only have to ask a small number of people for it to be representative. So we've done quite a lot of work so that people locally can ask these questions. And the second thing to say is that it can be very expensive if you use a marketing company to help you with this information. But what we've done is we've actually used marketing students who are learning marketing at local colleges. And what they've done is they've come into our libraries and into our communities, and as part of their project, they've done survey work and focus groups and questionnaires. And they've also observed people in the libraries for us to show us what they're doing. So it doesn't have to be expensive to run your own surveys by using local people who want to have a project anyway, and they've enjoyed it very much, many of the students. Okay, I think we're going to move on to talking about branding and marketing of our libraries. And I just want to share with you the process that we've been through before we launched the Love Libraries campaign. And I'm very grateful to Provocateur, who are a marketing company, who did these slides, or some of the slides that I'm going to show you. So I do want to acknowledge their help. What they did was they went right back to basics. And they asked the question, how do we create a shared vision of the future public libraries that library staff can believe in, that the public can be inspired by, and that opinion formers recognise as being of value to society? That was their challenge. So they asked a lot of searching questions about libraries. The first thing they asked was market forces. Do we need libraries anymore? Surely everyone can get all the information they want from the internet. I expect you've heard that quite a lot. Why aren't libraries going up in their usage? Why are some libraries declining? They looked at the market forces about libraries. They then looked at customers and the different experiences and needs and expectations that they have of our libraries. They looked at new perceptions of the role and the challenge facing libraries. And they looked at the current service that reflects diverse agendas and resources. So they did exactly what you're doing in your living library plan. The first thing they did was look at what we call the stakeholders. Whose interest is it that the library exists and does a good job? Well, there's the public, isn't there? There are customers, there are potential customers, they're the people that matter. Then there's the staff who work in the libraries, you and your colleagues, who actually feel very committed to the service and very enthusiastic to make the service prosper and thrive in a changing world. Then there's the people in the UK context who pay for the libraries, the local and central government agenda. Right now in the UK, we're very focused on what we call social inclusion. We want to make sure that no one is left behind, that everyone has the chance for education and the chance to better themselves and better their lives economically, socially, and also through their learning and their education. And the other stakeholder is potential partners. So the whole Love Libraries campaign is run by a partnership between publishers and libraries. It's very unique and very powerful. And what they've said is what we need above all is to be clear. We need to be clear about these things. We need to be clear what is the role of the library, what is it there for. We need to have clear communications. What's our message? What are the three things that we want to tell the world about public libraries? We need to have a very clear offer. What can you expect from your library? If you want to make an inquiry, how quickly will it be answered? What can you expect when you order a book? How long will it take for you to get the book that you've ordered? Standards of service, really. Clear value. We have a lovely quote from a Bookstart mother who said, if it wasn't for Bookstart, I would not have used the library. I would not have known how to join and how to enjoy it. It's so important for my child. I'm going to carry on using it because he will grow up with a love of reading and a love of learning. So a clear reason to use libraries, a clear value, not only for me and you, but for children. When we asked older people about technology in libraries, we expected a lot of them to say that they didn't like computers, but they did want more books. What surprised us was that older people said, yes, we must have computers in libraries, because that means that children, it might not be for me, but for children, they can have the chances I haven't got. It's essential that they connect with the world. So people can surprise you in values that they see for themselves and for others, and most of all, clear vision of where you want to take the service. So they ask some questions that you might want to ask as well. What makes public libraries special? What role do we want public libraries to play? How do we want people to think and feel about public libraries? Do we want them to feel that they're nice but not essential? Do we want them to feel warm and cuddly about them? Or do we want to feel that they're really useful and vital part of their daily lives? All sorts of options, really. What are the most important messages that we need to communicate? What kind of culture should public libraries reflect? One of the successes of public libraries, I believe, is their democratic nature. The way in which they say, it doesn't matter who you are, or where you were born, or who your family is. What matters is we have here knowledge for you to look at and to borrow, and for other people to share as well. And last but not least, can't quite read it, look at my screen. What is our vision for the future of public libraries? So we looked at a tale of two libraries, like that famous book, A Tale of Two Cities. Public libraries today and public libraries in the future. And the challenge they felt was fourfold: to change the image of libraries, to transform how they looked and felt to people, to make them modern and compelling. Secondly, to celebrate the shared culture that we have about libraries, but simply to bring it up to date, to ensure that we told people that we had the most helpful staff in the world, that that's what they wanted to do. To improve the customer experience. Are they queuing for a long time? How can we use technology to have shorter queues? What can we do when the library is so busy that there is no place quiet to sit? And how can we make the services more compelling? How can we make sure that the services that we offer are constantly changing, are constantly exciting, are always attractive to people? That's a real challenge. We asked people what the word library meant to them, and these are the different things that they came up with. And some of them about what the library is, like the book stock, and some of them are about what the library does, like it stimulates creativity. And our own British library, which is in London, has set its mission as to create an innovative nation. So they support research and development by people in order to make us all more innovative and therefore more able to thrive in a globalised world. They looked at 5 elements of the services: the space, the values, the people and the impact. And I love this because this is to me the essence of it. They said that the fact that libraries are difficult to pin down might seem a weakness, but is actually a strength, because that means that the diversity of offer that we have meets everybody's need. It's also the fact that if you come into a library, you don't have to do one thing. You can do lots of things. You can look through the newspapers. You can borrow a book. You can listen to a CD. You can have a go at learning a new skill. You can check things out on the internet, all in one place, all in one visit. And then we said to people, well, the library is, what is it to you? What could it be? And it's all these things, excuse me, a discovery centre, a forum for the exchange of ideas. Because when you read a book, you're conversing with someone who is either distant from you or lived in an age gone by. And if libraries are about conversations and exchanging knowledge, then the kinds of activities here at TKP, the forum we're having now about the future of public libraries, libraries should be at the centre of those debates, those issues, the way in which we meet together and mind meets mind. A conduit, a gateway, a teacher, a learning space, a social place. I love the last one most of all, where the library is an Aladdin's cave. What we found in the UK is that we must value the sense of discovery and surprise that a library holds for people. Because often the most powerful library experiences are the ones you hadn't planned. Many of our authors speak about using a library and discovering a new author that's transformed their life, or finding out something that they didn't expect to find out. So an Aladdin's cave, a place of surprise, a place of happen chance, that's the magic of modern library. And we see libraries as being about all these things, about knowledge and information, about books and reading, at the same time being about learning because you want to, about education, about a public space, about empowering people, all of these spectrum of needs. So we said, there's no one answer. There's no one answer of what is a library. The strength lies in their flexibility to customer needs, and the challenge is to create a vision that is understood and to link all these things up. The only thing for sure, this is what our marketing firm concluded, was that books and reading will remain at the very heart of the library's role, the library of the 21st century. So then we looked at, well, what brands would you like the library to be like? How would you like people to feel about libraries? So let's have a look at some of these. Some you'll be familiar with and some less so. But certainly, do you want the library to be a Google? Do you want it to be Microsoft or Amazon? Do you want it to be like, I'm looking at the other ones, Virgin you may be familiar with, some of them, and the Tate, yes. So what we said about these brands, if you look at them closely, is, okay, let's look at that and see. One's got, just trying to find it, Microsoft. You might want the library to be like Microsoft, known as an innovator, always doing something new. You might want your library to be like Google, the first place you check, celebrating the library as a place of first. If in doubt, ask the library, they'll know. You might want it to be like a Citizens Advice Bureau, which is a UK facility. Whatever you need, if you want any advice, we can help. You might want it to be like one of our supermarkets, Tesco's. It's a very big supermarket in the UK. And they have a feeling that they understand their customers. And that's why they've been so successful. So they stock a lot of other goods apart from groceries in their supermarkets. So think about doing something like this in Thailand and having all the brands and thinking, what brand do you want for your library? It's a very interesting exercise to do. And what we said was these are the brands that we want in a modern public library. We want it to be useful. We want it to be desirable. We want it to be trusted. The place you go because the only people that the staff are interested in is you and your knowledge needs. We want it to be customer focused, to have imagination, energy, quality and humour. All of these we want of our 21st century public library, and you do too. And they said, well actually, many libraries already have these qualities. The challenge is to make it part of the story they would take to the world. So libraries do a lot of good things, but our libraries are very poor at telling people about the good things that they're doing. They then looked at library staff and they concluded this, and I think this is essential, that modern public library staff are a most unique and special group of people. They will be the champions of the new vision and the advocates of their service and the heart of the library culture. And they asked staff what they felt like. And they came up with all these things. They said they felt like a teacher, like an entrepreneur, like an encyclopedia, like an emergency service when people have to do homework now and they're helping them out. They felt like a coach, a performer, a cultural worker, a guide, and many more roles. So I wonder if you ask your staff, what do you feel like? How many of these would be similar? What do you feel like? What is your role? And they went further. They said, in fact, the modern public library will only be successful if it embraces and is shaped by the passion, the expertise and the qualities of the staff of our libraries. They are the heart of the success of our public libraries. And they need to be all these things quite a tall order. The staff themselves have a very strong commitment and they say, we change people's lives. That's what they believe. So the staff in libraries are very much people, very much about building relationships with customers, with their partners, very good at social interaction, at talking with people. You remember my young woman, Julie, who was 16, saying, the library staff are my friends. And that's how it feels to many of the staff too. So the opportunity is there to take the culture and the expertise of our staff to the very heart of the vision for a new library service. I really love this quote because it sums up in a funny way what libraries are really about. There's not a single library in the world that is about books. Every library in the world is about the reading experience, the way in which the encounter with that book or that knowledge or that website or that newspaper or that CD is actually affecting your life. And therefore we say it's not about promoting the sausage, which is the library and the physical environment. It's about the sizzle, which is the effect that the library has on your life. So we say it's about not promoting the sausage, but the sizzle. And the sizzle for me is the reading experience, the way in which books make you laugh, they make you cry, they make you happy, they make you unhappy. The way in which reading about someone else's life can actually enable you to walk in their shoes for a brief time. And the way in which reading adds to your life and your life experiences. Reading is life. So they came up with what is the library, and they said the library is the heart of the community. I'm sorry, it gets better. And they said, why is the library the heart of the community? And they said, because all the best things come from the heart. It is the blood that sustains us. It is our passion and love. It is honesty and goodwill. It is the sense of what we feel and trust and the knowledge of what we value. So that's why libraries are the heart of the community. And what they observed was that when people talk about the library, they often talk about my library. And that's very special. There are not many places that people take to their heart. I'm certain that everyone that uses TKP sees it as my TKP, not the TKP. And I think that's because they feel it's theirs, they're involved, it's part of who they are. So libraries are about making lives richer, aren't they? Enabling us to read more, learn more, read differently, learn differently, to explore, to meet, to inquire, and to discover all those good things that have impact. So that's the journey we've taken in our branding of our libraries. What I want you to do, and I know it's very hot, but it would be very useful if you could, is you've got in your pack 3 handouts. Has everyone got one of these in their packs? Yes? Okay, looks like this. It begins with one sheet that says Vision of the Ideal Library. A second sheet that says Suggested Improvements in the Library Service. And a third sheet that says Perceptions of Libraries. And what I'd like you to do with the person you're sitting next to is to come up with 10 things that you would do to change the bad things about libraries on that last sheet. So it says bad things. What I want you to do is come up with 10 ways in which you would change those things. Some of them you could take from the Vision of the Ideal Library. Some of them you could take from the Perceptions of Libraries by young people. And I'm going to hand around some postcards for you to write down your 10 things on. So if you want to begin discussing with the person you're sitting next to, and we'll take about 15 minutes to do this. Is that okay? All right, okay. If you want to start, that's good. I wanted to pick up on was the the point that somebody made about having other things located in the library, like the health and massage centre. And many of our libraries are joined up with many healthy places, like there are libraries with swimming pools, where the library and the swimming pool are in the same building. There are libraries in schools, public libraries in schools, as I know there are here. There are also libraries that have bookshops in them. And one way for doing that is that because it's very risky for a bookshop to be in a library, it may not make enough money. Some libraries have done it so that the bookshop comes into their library at key times of the year. So, for example, before the school term starts, a bookshop will come into the library and they will sell textbooks ready for the new year. And that does two things. It helps the bookshop because they've got students who are buying textbooks in the library and that helps them. Secondly, it helps the library because they have long waiting lists for many of the textbooks and the students can buy them. And it also helps the library because they take a percentage of the profit. So for having the bookstore in the library for a weekend, then they take an amount of money. And then the third thing I wanted to pick up was the 24-hour service. No, you will not be working 24 hours a day. You already work very long hours. But a serious point is that some of our libraries, particularly when the new Harry Potter books were out, held overnight parties in the library. So what they did was the Harry Potter book was launched at midnight on a particular day, and they actually had bedtime stories in the library where the staff wore pyjamas and they had a local bed company who supplied some beds to go into the library so that they could enjoy bedtime stories together. And then at midnight, they all went together to the bookstore to buy the Harry Potter book. And then they had food back in the library for a midnight feast. So when we talk about 24-hour libraries, we're not only talking about services, but we're also talking about how you might do special events where you literally do open the library at night just for a publicity. And there was enormous publicity for all those Harry Potter events because the press and the media found it very captivating. And then a final point about using the media, that actually the idea of the community television and community radio is a very good one. And if you manage to break into that, you'll have done better than we have, because we haven't managed to get very much involvement of the media, who think libraries are boring and who think that libraries don't have exciting things happening in them. However, what I want to stress is that you can often offer radio stations book slots where you get people talking about their reading. So whether you get a famous person talking about what they like to read, or you pick up on something that's going on. For example, at the moment, in England particularly, everyone is very, very happy about the World Cup and about England being in the World Cup final next month. So here in Thailand, everyone is wearing yellow, which is for the King's 60 years, which is wonderful. And in the UK, everyone is wearing red and white for the England football team. So what many libraries are doing are having football parties so that they can introduce young people to the many books that are written about football, because many youngsters don't know that there are lots of good stories about football. And the second thing they do is to get footballers to come into the library to talk about their reading and about the exciting stories that they have about football matches and about games that are very good. So there's lots that you can do. The one that pleases me most of all is about networking, because together you are very strong. And if if 2 or 3 of you or a group of you can decide that you will work together to develop one activity each, and then you swap them so that you each do each other's activities, then you generate a lot of excitement and a lot of good work. And that's how libraries work in the UK. They'll actually all come up with one idea and then they'll share them. And that way, so much creativity is enhanced. So what I hope is that from this long list that you're going to have, you are sharing each other's creativity and ideas. So I think it's wonderful.
เกรซเขาก็ทำงานมาก่อนมานี่นะคะแล้วก็เขาก็บอกว่าห้องสมุดของฉันเปรียบเสมือนประภาคารซึ่งส่องสว่างจิตวิญญาณของฉันนะคะเหมือนกับการเดินทางที่มีแสงแดดอันอบอุ่นไปยังดินแดนที่อยู่ห่างไกลเป็นการเดินทางที่มหัศจรรย์นะคะนำไปสู่ทุกๆเรื่องและเมื่อทุกสิ่งทุกอย่างนั้นรอบตัวเราเนี่ยมืดมิดเหมือนกลางคืนห้องสมุดของฉันส่องสว่างเหมือนกับว่าเป็นแสงสว่างที่เชิญชวนนะคะแม้กระทั่งวันที่น่าเบื่อที่สุดซึ่งห้องสมุดที่เปรียบเหมือนแสงสว่างนี้ก็จะนำฉันไปยังดินแดนอันไกลแสนไกลนะคะทีนี้ใน3ส่วนนั้นเนี่ยที่ได้พูดไว้องค์ประกอบ3สิ่งนั้นเนี่ยนะคะก็ถ้าน้องๆลองนำสิ่งที่ได้รับจาก TK Park 3 วันนี้นะคะจากวิทยากรทั้งของประเทศไทยแล้วก็จากประเทศอังกฤษนะคะซึ่งบินมาเพื่อพูดคุยกับน้องโดยเฉพาะเกรซนี่ส่งตรงมาคือไปขอเกรซทั้งที่คิวของเกรซเนี่ยยุ่งมากก็แทรกคิวนะคะด้วยการประสานของ British Council แล้วก็นี่แหละค่ะก็คือเน็ตเวิร์กอย่างหนึ่งก็คือเครือข่ายอย่างหนึ่งเพื่อที่จะมาบอกว่าห้องสมุดเนี่ยต้องเดินด้วยจิตวิญญาณต้องเดินด้วยใจเหมือนกับที่เมื่อสักครู่เขามีบทกวีอยู่บทหนึ่งนะคะสิ่งที่ดีที่สุดเนี่ยจะต้องมาจากจิตใจคือจิตวิญญาณเท่านั้นที่จะทำให้ห้องสมุดของท่านมีชีวิตแล้วก็สายเลือดที่เลือดเนื้อที่จะทำให้ห้องสมุดเนี่ยยืนยงอยู่ได้มั่นคงนะคะก็คือ passion กับ love ความรักแล้วก็การที่ทำอย่างคลั่งไคล้ไหลหลงต้องบอกว่าหลายๆคนที่นี่นะคะเห็นหนังสือแล้วตื่นเต้นเห็นคนที่มาห้องสมุดแล้วตื่นเต้นมันเป็น passion มันเป็นความรักที่อยากจะแบ่งปันสิ่งที่เรารู้สิ่งที่เราเห็นว่าดีให้กับเด็กๆแล้วก็ประชาชนแล้วก็ honesty ก็คือการทำเรื่องนี้อย่างซื่อสัตย์นะคะแล้วก็ความปรารถนาดีเป็น good will ของเรานะคะแล้วก็สิ่งที่เรารู้สึกสิ่งที่เราเชื่อท่านต้องเชื่อในห้องสมุดของท่านท่านต้องเชื่อในพลังของท่านถึงแม้ว่าผู้บังคับบัญชาจะไม่เห็นด้วยถึงแม้ว่าหลายๆท่านที่บอกว่าอยากมีสระว่ายน้ำเนี่ยมันก็อาจจะแบบว่าไม่ใช่มันเป็นวัตถุที่อาจจะไม่จำเป็นสำหรับห้องสมุดมีชีวิตก็ได้ท่านต้องมองดูว่าอะไรเป็นสิ่งที่จำเป็นที่จะทำให้ห้องสมุดของท่านมีชีวิตดิฉันคิดว่าต้องตั้งต้นด้วยสิ่งนี้ค่ะจิตวิญญาณความเชื่อในสิ่งที่ตัวเองทำแล้วมันจะเกิดพลังนะคะแล้วก็สิ่งที่สำคัญจิตวิญญาณนั้นจะต้องมาจากความรู้สึกที่ว่าเรารู้อะไรเราเห็นอะไรดีแล้วเราอยากจะให้คนอื่นนั้นรู้อย่างที่เรารู้นะคะก็เนี่ยค่ะถ้า3วันนี้ลองเอาสิ่งที่เราทำเวิร์กช็อปเมื่อสักครู่นะคะพัฒนาขึ้นมาเป็นโครงการแล้วกลับมาพบกันอีกครั้งหนึ่งในเดือนกรกฎาคมด้วยสิ่งที่อยู่บนหน้าจอของเราตรงนี้นะคะก็ต้องเริ่มต้นนะคะว่า Heart ห้องสมุดต้องมีหัวใจค่ะแล้วคนที่ทำงานห้องสมุดต้องมีหัวใจค่ะนะคะขอบคุณค่ะ